My name is Isam from ISD Architects, where we help home and business owners realize their dream homes and dream businesses through considering or highly considering the environment, the user's health, and prioritizing as well the aesthetics and the cultural vitality. In this video, I'm going to talk about how we can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in order to minimize global warming phenomenon as a first step to reverse the process that was caused by a couple of hundreds of years of misuse and irresponsible, I would say irresponsible development and industrialization. First, we must, before we go into the subject, we must define what is greenhouse gas emissions. As explained before, the greenhouse gas emissions are gases that retain the heat that outflow from Earth to the atmosphere and return it back to Earth. These gases are numerous, but the carbon dioxide is the main player. That's why everybody talks about carbon dioxide as the main player or the main factor of increasing, causing the global warming. Now there are other gases such as the methane, the nitrous oxide N2O, the hydrofluorocarbons, the HFCs, and the perfluorocarbons, the PFCs, as well as the sulfur hexafluoride or SF6. Now these complicated names are just names of gases that are responsible for the global warming and the increase of the Earth temperature. But mainly we should think about it as CO2 because it is responsible for the majority of the global warming phenomenon that we are witnessing now, and it became a fact, a scientific fact. If we start with the energy use, we would realize that approximately 40% of the energy use is on the globe, on the Earth level, is caused by buildings. We'll talk about what part of the building processes is responsible for the energy use most. Now second, Earth is about 1/3 or 30% responsible for the raw materials extraction or use. Number 3, we have about 25% of solid waste produced by buildings again. Number 4, we talk here about, or shows here about the water use, which is also about 25% of the water used on Earth is required or has been acquired actually by buildings. And finally, the greenhouse gas emissions caused by caused by building processes globally is 1/3 or 30%, almost 30% of the total factors such as aviation, for example, the fuel used in airplanes, cars, manufacturing, agriculture, and so on and so forth. So buildings have about 1/3. This shows us the magnitude of buildings on the global warming phenomenon. Now this diagram is within the energy use. How much is the share for the construction and how much is the share of operation? As you can see, between 80 and 90% of the energy used in buildings goes 80 to 90% goes to operational functions such as heating, ventilation, cooling, lighting, appliances, and so on and so forth. So anything that has to do with the operation of the building itself goes into this category. And as you can see, it's quite, it's the lion's share of the consumption of energy. It's the operation of the building. While the construction, the extraction of raw materials, the commuting of the staff and of the contractor staff and of the demolition, for example, is only about 10 to 20% of the energy use in the construction process. Now, I'm going to make some deductions about what we need to do now in order to, as architects as well as home and business owners, what we can do in order to alter, to minimize the impact of buildings. How can we, if we are intending to build or to design, whether it's a renovation or an addition or a new construction, how can we do something and be aware and be acknowledged about the fact that this global warming can be reduced and reversed, actually, if we can do our share in minimizing the energy consumption. So the main factor here is the energy use, and that's why I need to explain how buildings are an important part, as we saw in the production of greenhouse gas emissions, namely carbon dioxide, and through the energy use that we said is mostly coming through heating, cooling, ventilating. So these functions are related to the everyday operation of the building rather than the construction itself, which of course has its own share, but as you can see here in the graph, it's a minimal share compared to the usage, day-to-day usage of the building. Now I want to sketch something that could be very simple but easy to understand. So if you have a building, for example, and this building is a new construction, etc., and placing it on site is one of the key issues for new construction buildings. Now, if you're not doing a new construction, and we're assuming that you're topping up your building and creating another story, then where do you open? Of course, we're not going to consider the zoning or the building code variables. We're just going to consider them for a moment as constants. So where do you maximize your openings, for example, towards this side or towards the back? And what are the environmental factors that could help this design be more effective environmentally in order to minimize the reliance on the furnace or the water heater or the boiler to produce more energy, consume more energy to heat the space? How to maximize? Do you want to use photovoltaics on this pitched roof? If the sun is coming through this direction, would it be more prudent to rely on the sun and probably minimize or cut your energy bills by half, in addition to, and that means eventually you're cutting your energy expenditure or consumption by half. So these factors are design related issues. So that's what we call smart design, starting from the planning level. So we're talking about how to place the mass, but if we are really talking about the site planning level, For example, we have a property like that, and then we have the sound path, for example, coming this way to the side. Then how to place your strip plaza, for example. And again, there are many factors in the design process. However, because we are talking about the environment, the reduction of energy, we're going to consider all the other factors constant and only the environmental factor as constant, as variable. So would you design it that way and you put all your parking lots here, or would you design it probably like that, and if there was a street coming that way, then you enter and you place all your parking that way or that way, and where your service buildings are or your pads and so on and so forth. And I'm talking here about commercial buildings. The same applies for placing a house, even though the house is most probably very limited in the site and the property. But if you have a row house, for example, row houses, then also it has a mass. That so whether you put it that way, or probably you want to put it in, for example, this way, and what is each mass, or create a courtyard in the middle that has probably some greenery, some landscape elements that will help soothe the environment and make it less harsh. For example, in the winter it becomes less harsh if you have wind coming through these areas, or if the wind coming through this area. What do we do here in order to create wind barriers or wind stoppers in this area, and what do we create here, and where would the parking be? I would consider that the environmental aspect of planning, pre-planning, planning, and design of the building itself as a major element, considering the crisis that the globe, Earth, the environment, the ecosystem is facing, and our responsibilities as conscious human beings to protect the environment from further damage, not only for the future generations, for the children, the grandchildren, the grand-grandchildren, but also for us. We can alter this process today, and we can reap the benefits of that. For example, green buildings, green homes are much more pleasant, they are healthier, they are much more pleasant even from the psychological point of view. Aesthetically, they could be more pleasing because they could be modern. When you maximize the windows and you intentionally know that the sun is coming through here and you're heating the space next to it, then that feel of warmth in the winter and protection in the summer, or coolness in the summer, will be a major aesthetical factor that the end user, the home and business owner, would benefit. For the users of the building, if the building is a production facility, is a factory or an office building or even a retail, then the production of the employees will increase just because they feel that the environment is much more pleasant, that sun is coming through in the winter time, that they feel they're not in a dungeon place, very dark, but really in a warm place. And all of these factors are design-related factors. So I hope you found this video useful. I encourage everyone to consider the environment when they design, when they build, day-to-day use of the building in regards to lights, appliances, water fixtures, and so on and so forth. But the design, anyone who's thinking of design or renovation or modeling or addition or topping up their buildings, then please consider the environment, consider what impact not only the construction process itself, but the life cycle of the building. The life cycle is when the building is built and operating until it is demolished and the waste is taken off to another place. Thank you again for watching this video. I hope you found it useful, and please feel free to comment, feel free to ask any questions in this regard, and I'll be more than happy to answer you. Until then, until next video, to protect our environment, I wish you all the best, and thank you again.